All right, for this video, I wanted to discuss the F-1 student visa in the United States and what are some of the principal tax issues that you need to be aware of if you are a student in the United States on an F-1 visa. All right, so some of the basics to start with here at the top. The F-1 visa, student visa, issued to citizens of non-U.S. countries that want to come to the United States to live and attend school. Now, you can get an F-1 visa for almost any type of education in the United States. So that includes elementary school education, high school, all the way up to university, right? So if you want to get your 4-year college degree, go to grad school, get a PhD, all of these generally can be accomplished by getting an F-1 visa. So now, what are the U.S. tax issues for F-1 visa holders? Well, the first thing to be aware of is that just because you get an F-1 visa does not mean you're automatically a U.S. tax resident. Now, U.S. tax resident means that not only are you subject to U.S. taxes, but you pay taxes on your worldwide income, right? That's what it means to be a U.S. tax resident. Versus if you're a non-resident, you're only subject to taxes in the U.S. on those U.S. source earnings. Okay, so if you're a non-resident and you have investments all over the world, it's just the U.S. piece that you pay tax on. So U.S. tax residents rather, include individuals like U.S. citizens, U.S. green card holders, and then individuals that meet the substantial presence test. Okay, so the substantial presence test, what is that? It's any type of visa, even if you don't have a visa, so let's say you're in the country illegally, if you are physically present in the United States enough days during the year, you can meet the substantial presence test, and that makes you a U.S. tax resident, right? So the individual, for students in this case, right, think about it this way. If you're an F-1 student visa holder, and you come to the United States and you're in the United States, let's say, 8 or 9 months out of the year, you're not a U.S. citizen, you don't have a U.S. green card, so you're not a permanent resident, but you could meet the substantial presence test because you're in the United States enough days. However, here's the exception to the rule. Students under an F-1 visa do not count the days they are in the U.S. towards the substantial presence test. So that's the tax loophole here, if you want to call it that. If you are in the United States on a U.S. student visa, an F-1, and you're in the United States enough days to meet that substantial presence test, you can override those days because they don't count towards your day count, right? So the reference here, if you want to check this, it's Treasury Reg Section 301 7701 B-3B13, right? Okay, so if we look at an example here, we have John. He's a German citizen, moves to the U.S. under an F-1 visa because he's going to University of Miami. Now, John's a shareholder in a foreign mutual fund that qualifies as a PFIC, so passive foreign investment company. If John were to become a U.S. tax resident because of this substantial presence test, he would not only have to file a Form 1040, U.S. individual income tax return, but he would also have to include the 8621 for a PFIC. But again, because John is in the U.S. on an F-1, he still qualifies as a non-resident for federal tax purposes. So he doesn't have to file a 1040, doesn't have to do the 8621. He's good to go. Now, U.S. tax treaty relief does step in here sometimes, not for students, but if you're in the United States temporarily under a different kind of visa, a treaty, if you're from a treaty country, might also provide a similar relief. It might override the day count because you're in the United States for a particular purpose and the treaty exempts those days. For students, it's a moot issue, right? It doesn't matter whether you're in a treaty country or not. If you're on an F-1 visa, you get this kind of relief. Now, here's what you must do. You've got to file Form 8843, Statement for Exempt Individuals. I've got a separate video on this. I'll put a link below. But what you have to do is, in order to override the day count, and you're an exempt individual, which includes a student, it's very clear in the regulations and the instructions, you've got to file this 8843 with the IRS to basically assert that you're in the U.S. for enough days to meet the sub-presence test, but you're going to override it because I'm on an F-1 visa. right? Now, you can file it two ways. You can file it separately, so just fill out the 8843, sign it, mail it into the IRS, done, or you can file it with a 1040NR. Now, the 1040NR, who would need to file that? Well, you can always file it even if you don't have any U.S. source income, and you can attach the 8843 and just be done with it that way. But you would need to file the 1040NR if you were a student that had some U.S. source income. So if you were earning U.S. source income because you were working a job in the United States while being a student, well, now you have some U.S. source income that's subject to tax. So you've got to file the 1040NR, report the income, pay the tax. But again, it's just the U.S. source piece. If you file this 8843 under the F-1 visa, you're overriding that U.S. tax residency, which is really what you're after, right? What we don't want to have is an individual in the United States and become a U.S. tax resident. This is particularly a problem for children that have parents that are very wealthy, and they've set up a lot of different trusts and different types of accounts for their kids, a lot of estate planning, gift tax planning. The last thing you want, so if you're a parent and you're going to send your kid to school in the United States, be very, very careful about these rules, because the last thing you want is to have, let's say, a foreign trust with a beneficiary, your child, and then your child becomes a U.S. tax resident because they're in the United States. It creates a massive amount of headaches for you and your kids, right? So, so be very, very careful. So that covers it for this video. I hope that was helpful. Again, if you're an F-1 student visa holder in the United States, you're already in the United States, or you're thinking about coming to the United States, be mindful of these rules, because very, very important, again, to try to avoid U.S. tax residency wherever possible. All right, so that covers it for this video. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, obviously, please leave me a comment below. I try to answer as many as I can. And like I said earlier in the part of the video, I will put a link to not only the form itself and the instructions, but I do have a tutorial available on the 8843 itself that covers filing it for exempt individuals. So students fall within that category. So again, it's something you really, really want to make sure that you do. Do not miss this, because again, what we're trying to do here is avoid U.S. tax residency at all costs. Okay, so again, that covers it for this video. I'm going to do some more videos on other types of visa holders in the United States, B1, 2, J1, J2, all the different types that you might be able to get when you enter the United States. And so what are the various U.S. tax issues that plague those types of visa holders. So, all right, so thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thank you.